Happy Wednesday.
Good morning.
This is November 2nd, 2020, and this is episode 129.
It's actually December 2nd.
What did I say?
November.
Same thing in Minnesota. Like literally, it's outside. It's the same temperature as it probably was on November 2nd. How am I supposed to know what day it is, Dan?
Well, that's what calendars are for, Mark.
That's true. Yes, it's December 2nd. We should introduce ourselves and dive into the yummy topic for today. I'm Mark Van Steenwyk. I'm the director for the Center for Prophetic Imagination.
And I'm Daniel Wolpert. I direct MICA, the Minnesota Institute of Contemplation and Healing. And so today we are discussing the White Tantrum, which I got to witness in full view last night. So that's why we're talking about it, because it's on my mind. So as many of you remember, there were some social uprisings a few months ago.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I have this vague memory of it. And so George Floyd was murdered 2 blocks from my house. And there were a lot of protests and a lot of focus on the problem of policing in Minneapolis and elsewhere around the country. And there was all this stuff about, like, we're going to change things, we're going to, do something different, blah, 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 blah. So now the Minneapolis City Council is looking at its budget. The mayor is looking at the budget. And a lot of the discussion is on how we can put more money into policing. And it's just sort of amazing, like, how that's shifted. And so 3 council people have put out a proposal that would take a relatively tiny amount of money, $8 million out of a $198 million budget, out of the police budget and put it towards a number of different sorts of programs. One of them, some that I've actually been doing a lot of work on with one of the local organizations, getting an alternative 911 response to mental health crisis calls, taking it out of the police hands. But there are a few other initiatives in there. And so last night, one of the council members, Steve Fletcher, had this little online, he calls them coffee chats. And people could come and ask questions, and he could talk about what was going on. And he represents the district that spans the Mississippi River. So on one side, it's a lot of downtown Minneapolis. The other side, it's what we call Northeast, for those of you that aren't familiar with Minneapolis geography. So it's a lot of the big, downtown condos, and that's become the cool thing, right? To get a condo on the river, and they cost upwards of $1 million a piece. And so those are the folks that are there. And so, he did this great presentation. I'd never heard him speak before or been to any of his events. He's extremely intelligent, a really interesting analysis about why there's been an increase in crime in Minneapolis over the last 6 months. And then it was question time. And oh my God, the parade of, it really, honestly, it's like, it makes me super embarrassed to be an old white guy, because it was a parade of old white guys, sometimes with their, wives sitting in the background with a scared look on their face on these Zoom meetings. Just lambasting this guy and having a total shit fit.
Did any of them look like this? Like that?
Yeah, they did. They kind of look like that. Only the crown was invisible, but yeah, they look like that.
But the sense of entitlement was all the same.
Yeah, basically, the general tone of the relationship to Steve was, "You're my servant. I'm now worried, and you better fix this today." Right? And just whining, complaining, interrupting him, not listening to him. I am slightly nervous and I am slightly scared, and you better fix this right now. And why isn't there a policeman on every corner making me feel safe? Wah. Yeah. So we need to talk about this.
Well, yes, and it's indicative of so many issues in our society. This sort of white entitlement, white fragility, white tears, all that nice, delicious soup of nastiness. But it's fascinating to me, like how much anxiety there is about these crime rates, and their assumption is that it's all like in their imagination, it's all tied to Black people getting too upset. Like there's a little bit of it's not like, hey, the pandemic is causing an economic downturn and economics drive crime rates, because most of these crimes are economically driven. Like carjackings are not usually done just for shits and giggles, although there's also like roving bands of youth who have nothing to do too. Like all these sorts of things can help explain stuff. No blaming of the police for like a bunch of police officers having a tantrum and quitting.
Yep.
Nope, it's just all about like my needs. It really, the issue is there's no such thing as an emergency in our country unless it's happening to the white middle class.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the solution, right? The solution always is, let's employ more force to suppress those people so that I can have my little garden of safety. My little garden of safety where I'm fine and, everything else outside I don't really care about. So CK is this is what these people were like last night.
This conversation is bullshit, and as a white person, I'm pissed. Lol.
Yeah, that was basically the attitude that was on full display. And and the other thing that went along with it is not only the attitude that was on full display, but then also the total lack of self-awareness. Right? The total lack of self-awareness. And we've talked a lot about how education doesn't help self-awareness necessarily. The other thing that doesn't help self-awareness is success. Right? I mean, sometimes you think, well, if I'm smart enough to be successful in society and have a big paying job and, manage a lot of people and, all this, like I maybe am more aware of what's going on. No, none at all. These people had clearly no self-reflection, no real care for anybody else. No thought of like, wow, if I as a white person am feeling scared for a week, what is it like to be an oppressed, marginalized person of color in America who's been scared for 400 years? Like, maybe I should care about that. No, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just, I can't walk my dog with the same level of certainty that I could 6 months ago, and you have to fix that right now. And people are literally saying that. I mean, this one woman just, oh my God, she completely went off. And she was like, government programs take 2 years to put into place, and I want to know how you're going to fix this today. I'm just like, what is wrong with you? I mean, it's just, yeah. So it's very, very interesting how that that kind of formation that we've talked about, and this incredible warping
Mm-hmm.
that privilege. So we were talking before how there's the phrase privilege. There's also the phrase entitlement, right? And so privilege is the external, right? I have privilege relative to other people,
Mm-hmm.
but then that privilege creates this internal formation, which is the entitlement, and that just completely warps your consciousness as a human being, to where really all you care about is yourself, and any slight shift in your internal equilibrium is felt as discomfort and has to be fixed.
Mm-hmm. Got some good comments coming in. Adam writes, there's also the proven tactic of police committing crimes or paying people to commit crimes as a form of propaganda when seeking public support and funding. The police do all kinds of really nasty stuff, and it's just part of our weird indoctrination as in our society that we somehow, if you're white, are told that you can trust the police, and that if anyone ever says something bad about the police, like, you're just crazy. That's just crazy talk. But they do all kinds of stuff to make themselves look better, and to make other people look bad, and to cause us to have difficult and problematic experiences, so we come running to them and saying, please save us, which is totally, we saw it happening. It's so funny. Like, all this has been so out in the open at this
Right.
point in time.
It's
Like,
so
in the
obvious.
maybe it's always been that way, and I just didn't have the perception. But to me, it was so obvious from the beginning. Oh, this is what the cops are going to do now. They're going to try to show us that without them, the city's going to burn down, and that somehow we can't live without them. And they're going to remind us in all these different ways. And then they're going to use the relationships with other institutions like the media to push this point, because when the media wants to talk to someone about crime, they call official people, they call the police. And so the Star Tribune has basically been the propaganda machine for the mayor and certain city council members and the police for months now. And it's just so obvious. But if you say that, people are like, how can you say that? That sounds like a conspiracy
theory.
No,
and and it was fascinating through this 6 months interacting with a number of the white people on my block. Many of whom are younger than me, and many of whom have no experience in any kind of advocacy or protest or justice work, and so this was kind of like hitting them, for the first time. And it was really interesting to talk to them and to watch their minds kind of try to grapple with the misinformation that they were being given, with the fact that they immediately believed everything that the police and the city council people and the governor and the head of the National Guard were telling us, all of which was bullshit. And for this to kind of slightly dawn on some of them, like, wait a minute, maybe this system is not working the way we assume it works.
mm-hmm.
And it's that lack of awareness, right? That the white sort of daze, the white anesthesia that then, if you're wakened from it, you have a tantrum. It's just like, a little kid, you wake them up from a nap too early and they have a tantrum.
So crabby. Studies writes, white middle class is entitlement, dysfunction, and codependency is really trippy.
It is really trippy. Yeah.
Adam writes, for sure. Yeah. Part of privilege is not having to be self-aware.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't have to be, because your safety, your life, your whatever is not required. Right. Everything else is taken care of for you. Yeah.
CK writes, as I shared with Mark, our property management company sent out a memo asking tenants to go to a board meeting conversation and talk about the uptick in crime. as a family who lives in the Stevens Square neighborhood, who pays attention to our community, we have not seen any uptick. We feel very safe in our neighborhood. In fact, we have noticed less of a police presence. And that's funny. Like, so CK sent me this letter, and it's all like, "We, your property managers, are your neighbors. We care about your safety. Together as a community, go and support the police." Like this whole thing, which is totally about serving their interests as the landowners, but then doing the same thing that like bosses do with their underpaid employees by throwing a pizza party, right? They're like, "We're all one family." Like they just pulled that. It was so naked. A lot of people fall for this, but it was so nakedly self-seeking to be like offensively. It was just gross. So thanks for sending that, CK, and thanks for reminding me about that. Adam writes, "No power analysis, no nuance, and an incredible sense of entitlement. Not only that, and it always comes back to this, no imagination or critical thinking when it comes to seeing and addressing the bigger picture." Yeah. No, it's like the society is built, the society is built for the really rich people, but like there has to be this giant buffer of white middle class people to kind of normalize all sorts of toxic crap. And so it's like we're conditioned to kind of just be content, and nothing is wrong unless it affects us. Right. It's so astonishing. So, because I'm pretty sure all these people at Steve Fletcher's coffee chat, Dan and I were talking about this beforehand, would probably think of themselves as very liberal, maybe even progressive people who care about those black people and their struggles, who wants everyone to have a fair shake at life. Right. They probably have all the right things to say, except for when it's uncomfortable and it causes an inconvenience to them. Right. Which is, in this case, it isn't even that big of an inconvenience because it's no one's going to, I'm sorry, Barbara, no one's going to steal your poodle. I don't like what's going to happen to you. Things are not necessarily less safe for you in that context. Like there's always reasons to maybe be a little bit worried about your safety, but like this uptick isn't really it's not a bunch of people roving the streets looking for white people to harm. I don't know what's going on in their imagination with this stuff.
Yeah, well, and and the other thing is that there is crime in America. There are too many guns in America. There are people that are poor and desperate or traumatized or angry or whatever, and it's like that's the reality. So if we actually want this to be better in a real way, we have to sit with the discomfort of that reality. But that whole business of I can't be uncomfortable for a minute, like I don't know, I'm so emotionally stunted. I don't know how to have an uncomfortable feeling and not react, not call one of my servants. I just had this image of, in the old days of like Downton Abbey or whatever, they got that cord that they pull, that rings the bell down in the servants' quarters. Yep. I mean, that's the image that I had. Like all these people are like ringing the bell, like, "Come on, fucking fix this for me. I'm uncomfortable."
Steve Fletcher is their valet.
Yeah, it's just
one of their footsmen.
It's just like, what is wrong with you that you can't just sit for a minute and be uncomfortable and go, okay, like what's going on and who else is uncomfortable and are things really that bad? I mean, I live 2 blocks from ground zero. It's like, things have been hard, but they're not that bad.
And if there are bad things, it's understanding where it comes from. I mean, this is a big battle happening in the city council now, and it's really just depressing to watch. But just even advocating any funding for things that are preventative or that are non-punitive is just making people lose their minds.
Right.
Like, and they're talking about a paltry sum. Like, there's none of this bold leadership that we were maybe vaguely hoping for in the beginning.
Right. That we were promised in the beginning.
Yeah. I'm just hoping I don't know. I'm just going to jump to this comment because I feel bad now. Jeremy writes, damn it. I actually suggested a pizza party for employees just 30 minutes ago. But, I mean, I don't want to just generalize all employers.
Right.
I mean, to me, there's a spectrum, and pizza's good. But like at the same time, there's something about a pizza party for employees that is kind of become a trope, but it doesn't have to be.
No, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, it depends. No. Yeah, it depends on the pizza. I remember one time I was invited. We were attending a Mormon church for a short period of time. My older siblings are baptized Mormon, but the younger ones of us were not. And so we got invited to this Mormon church, and afterwards they were going to have a pizza party at one of their houses. I'm like, this is going to be exciting because I've never had, it's in the big town. So I'm like, it's going to be big town pizza. And they gave us those Tostino party pizzas. I'm like, I'm never going to become a fucking Mormon if this is what this is the pizza they have.
Bad pizza and weird underwear.
That I think you just described Mormonism. That's very theologically astute. Okay, back to the comments here.
Back to Gus.
There's an amazing contrast between white people losing our minds loudly and being called frustrated versus black people, in particular, having an opinion in public and being labeled as angry or loud. Yes. Just this perception of like, it's about who is wielding power appropriately. Right. So white man being powerful and loud is seen as normative. But if somebody who's not a white man is loud, then they're angry and uppity. Like, this is baked in pretty hard. Like, talking to people about this, like, it's just, again, if you're not aware of things and you're kind of living in an entitled space, you don't catch the nuances of like how this works out. You're not paying attention. You can't see it. And so if someone calls you on it, you think, you get like this, you're like, how dare you? How dare you accuse me of being racist? I'm like, look, I mean, you're not special for being racist. That's everywhere. Like, everyone's kind of a little racist. I'm just pointing this out. And like, okay, sorry if that burst your bubble there, Gary. I'm sorry. I don't know why all white people are named Gary and Barbara to me. That just seems that's unfair. I know some great Garys and Barbaras, and
Really? Now we're going to have a comment from a Gary who did a pizza party.
Yeah.
They're going to be really pissed.
Julie writes, I've heard of white gays, but the white days is so on point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that really is what just struck me by about the third or fourth one of these people. And you could have sort of cloned them, right? I mean, they all kind of have the same look on their face that, serious, concerned, thoughtful, and just totally out to lunch. I mean, completely out to lunch. And it's very interesting.
Not even out to a good lunch. We're talking about like going to lunch at Applebee's. That's where they were out to lunch at. CK writes, after the dust settled, the conversation always goes white. Julie writes, instant gratification, parenting, and culture created a lot of people unable to experience discomfort required for growth. It's true. It's like a stunted moral or ethical development. I don't know what category to put it in. But it's astonishing to me. Like, we have this assumption that different levels of development all go up together. So if you're really smart, you must be wise. No, the wisest people I know didn't get good marks in their grades, or more moral and ethical development. And so you have all these people that went to like fancy schools. They think they're righteous people because of their level of successes within our society. And they don't even get the possibility that they could be stunted. And that's really sad and depressing. Like, for them, like, I want them to want more for themselves. But any suggestion that they have a deficiency, they immediately react instead of saying, look, here's an opportunity for growth. I can become more human. They don't even want that.
Yeah, well, it's sad and depressing for them, and it's very dangerous for the rest of the world. That's the problem.
Yeah, good point.
If it was only sad and depressing for them, I'd be like, okay, well, yeah, it's hard. But it's very dangerous for everybody else. And that's the toxicity of it.
I had a funny anecdote. We were going for a walk yesterday, and I said, try to have a conversation with my son. I said, there's werewolves and were-tigers. Like, what kind of were-animal would you want to be? So we started talking, and then somehow it got to the idea of like a skit or a film about on a full moon, a black man is bitten by a white rich guy. And so he has to chain himself up in his basement when the full moon comes out because being a white rich man is so dangerous to others. And so I thought, a were-rich guy, were-white rich guy would be the worst kind of were-animal to be because of the danger they bring to the world.
Yeah, there was some of that in Lovecraft Country, for those of you who have seen that. So.
Last I heard, the most common theft in the USA is wage theft. You're getting all Marxist on us, Gus. And it's actually like, even within the capitalist definitions, wage theft is the most common form of theft. And that's not even bringing in a Marxist analysis which would up the levels of wage theft even higher.
Well, and that's been highlighted here in Minneapolis, and the one of the worst places for that are sports arenas. And so both at the Twins Stadium and at the Vikings Stadium, the amount of wage theft that goes on of the people that work the concessions there is huge. And this is another great example. Like there was actually a big push to push a law to try to stop wage theft, which you wouldn't really think would be controversial on a certain level. It shouldn't
be at all.
Right. Yeah. But the massive pushback and the whole thing totally failed and fell apart. Because again, all these rich white folks were like, oh no, you can't force me to pay my workers. That would infringe upon my poodle walking.
Well, I saw a meme. It basically said, like, if you want to understand how class and capitalism works, think about what happens to your boss if he takes $100 out of your paycheck versus if you take $100 out of the till. That tells you kind of how the power dynamic. It's so funny the way libertarian capitalists get about stuff. They just can't see this, and it's like these naked examples of power imbalance abound. Like you do not get in trouble if you're like, well, I'm sorry, I can't pay you this week. Well, and I'm going to take this computer home with me. Like, you can't do that. You can't make it right yourself. You have to just suffer. Series writes, when entitlement is so bad that not even great evidence that doing preventative work saves money and balance the budget will convince them.
Yeah.
No, like they don't want, it's like there's a bunch of theater to this. Like they want us to feel fragile, that we depend on them. So if we somehow could solve problems and the police aren't needed anymore, certain powerful figures aren't needed anymore, that ruins the whole thing. So they have to make a big show. Like most of the things that are called justice in this society are either just purely punitive and disgusting, or it's a bunch of theater. It's really, there's not any justice really involved most of the time at all. Mark has got a long, deep belly laugh wanting to surface. It's in there.
It's Julius' assessment. You need some laughter yoga.
Is that a thing?
Oh yeah, it's a big thing. It's totally bizarre and ridiculous, but it's a big thing.
There used to be this phenomenon called holy laughter during the early charismatic days. Maybe I could get some holy laughter.
There you go.
Catherine writes, it reminds me of when I was on a neighborhood board. I remember you telling stories about that. And several white homeowners said to the faces of us other board members, who, including a bunch of low-income renters, that they didn't want, quote unquote, affordable housing built in our neighborhood at 30 to 60% AMI, which is not actually that cheap, because it would, quote unquote, bring crime via poor people.
I was like, we're already here.
Yeah, it's already here. I'm trying to decipher how you describe that little colon / emoji face. Yeah, what that emotion is called. But yeah, we're already here. CK writes, who has the right to emote? That's right. Adam writes, in those same meetings Catherine mentioned, these white people would whine, lie, throw tantrums, undermine the goals of the board, be wildly offensive, and when anyone, me, would respond to it, they'd be policed by the well-meaning white leadership, who also knew that what they were doing was abhorrent.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, it was interesting seeing that dynamic in this meeting last night. I mean, I think that there was part of, you know, Steve that just wanted to tell these people to stick it where the sun don't shine. But, you
Mm-hmm.
know, he's their servant, right? He's elected by them. So he has to be nice to them and put up with their nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Julia writes, when we poll our HECUA students every semester, they have overwhelmingly experienced wage theft. I mean, I've experienced wage theft.
Yeah, goes on all the time.
It's shitty. You can't. There's nothing you can. There's not a damn thing you can do about it. Like you're just stuck. Adam writes, Tiny Diner waited until the last minute to close during the pandemic. I remember hearing about this without communicating to the workers. They didn't pay the workers their last checks while fundraising for themselves, and now they've reopened like nothing ever happened. Now, just to give people context who aren't from here, South Minneapolis is kind of the progressive center of the Twin Cities, and Twin Cities is the progressive center of Minnesota, and Minnesota is the progressive center of the Midwest. So this is, and Tiny Diner's in the middle of that. And so they, you know, do the farm to table, organic. They do all the progressive things except for paying their damn workers.
Except for paying their workers.
While they are fundraising for themselves and they're reopening.
Well, and it wasn't even the regular wages that they withheld. It was the tip money. Right? So this is money that is just supposed to directly go right to the work, like pass through money. And and she just held that and made it disappear. And then when everybody, you know, had a fit about it, she was like, well, I don't have any money. You know, I can't give it to you. Like, where did it all go? Right. The police don't come arrest her somehow, miraculously.
Oh my God. You know, we could have a whole episode just about the petite bourgeoisie. Catherine writes, also, if you're afraid of poor people because they're poor, give us lower rent and we'll be better off, equals problem solved. Like, this is the thing. I don't think these people want the problem solved. They want their position maintained. To solve the problem would mean greater equity, and that damages their prestige. Like, protection of prestige is, you know, it's where it's at.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing that's causing all these people to freak out and vote for Trump, is they want to maintain and expand their prestige at the even if it's at the expense of others. Like, there's no way that these people at some deep level don't know that bringing police more presence is going to equal more Black death. They got to know that at some level, but at a certain level, they just really don't care. They do the performance thing when it benefits them, and when it doesn't, they don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, the people at the top of the pyramid don't want the pyramid to be flattened out.
No.
They want to stay at the top of the pyramid.
Just a few more comments, and we're just a little bit past.
We'll be done.
Scott writes, I appreciate y'all and your focus on how the prophetic task today is tied to social discernment and spiritual courage to stand in solidarity with the most vulnerable. Thank you, Scott. That's what we're going for. CK writes, Dan, did Cam Gordon contribute anything meaningful? I think this was just with one council person, right?
Yeah, this was just with one council person. The full council hearing is tonight. That's going to be, you want to watch the white people on parade. They've already got like 350 people signed up to tell them how they need more cops. So it'll be really exciting.
I did see Cam Gordon, who's, again, one of the more progressive of the city council people here in South Minneapolis. He posted something on Nextdoor. The comments were disgusting. So I chimed in and got heartily berated. It's always like 50 like scared white people to like 3 radical people lurking. And then we just, at a certain point, we just start trolling them.
You know, I think we need to redo the Nextdoor logo, and we need to turn the X and next into a little swastika.
Okay. Truth in advertising.
There we go.
Dave writes, solving problems diminishes privilege.
That's right. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody. It's great to hear from y'all and be with you. And we will be back tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, everybody.
You know, and if anybody needs anything, just ring your butler chime and we'll come fix it for you.
See you tomorrow.